The contact was already on the board when Resh Aben took the third watch, and it was already wrong. It sat in the priority channel of lane 11 like a stone dropped into a stream of glass beads, 1,100 registered hulls moving in metered intervals through the gravity rail, and one return that carried no registry, no tariff seal, no flight plan, and no fear. It was broadcasting. Not on the distress band, where intruders sometimes begged when the purge batteries woke. On the open band. On the band, the spine reserved for weather, for tariff notices, for the dry liturgy of traffic. It was broadcasting a voice. Resh stood at her station on the Warden Ring of Corval Spire. 60 kilometers of bastion needle hung above the amber storms of the gas giant Veshant, and listened to a sound that had no business existing inside the Hadron Imperium. The voice was small. It was high and uncertain, and it caught on its own words the way a hatchling's did when it had been crying and was trying to stop. It spoke a language no warden on the ring had ever heard, a soft, round-voweled tongue, and it said the same thing over and over with little variations. The way you repeat a thing when you believe somebody kind might eventually be listening. Then beneath the small voice in the dead-level tone of a machine, the same contact spoke again, and this time every warden on the ring went still, because the machine spoke flawless Hadron, not archive Hadron, not the stiff trade pigeon smugglers learned. It spoke current lane cipher, the rotating clearance dialect of the third spine, the one that had been issued 11 days ago and would burn in another 20, the one that existed in exactly 4 sealed registries and the mouths of licensed wardens. Lane 11 control. This is an unregistered return requesting transit instruction, the machine said, in cipher that should have been impossible for it to hold. Destination Earth. We have a passenger. We are lost. Please advise. The small voice came back over it, patient, fraying. Resh would learn, within the hour, what the words meant. She would carry them the rest of her life. Hello? We got turned around. Can you tell us the way home? Warden second grade Olin Taz was already keying the intrusion ladder. His breath vents flared wide with stress. Protocol was clean on this. An unregistered return inside a priority lane was a Class 1 violation of the spine. A Class 1 violation in cipher it should not possess was an act of espionage. Espionage inside lane 11. 1,100 civilian hulls in the rail was answered by the purge batteries, and the purge batteries did not issue warnings because the warning was the existence of the Imperium itself. Prefect Dolmas Kir came down the ring with his hands locked behind him, an old officer with rank bands to the elbow and a face like a closed gate. He watched the contact's track for the length of one slow breath. Confirm it holds our cipher, he said. Confirm, Taz said. 11-day key. Clean syntax. Prefect, it's requesting transit instruction like a registered freighter. It's queuing. It joined the interval pattern on its own, and it's holding lane discipline better than the ore haulers. Then it is mocking us, Kyrie said. Or probing us. Charge the batteries. Send authorization request to Marshal Draft's office. Purge solution on an espionage return. Civilian lane occupied. Request priority. He turned his double-pupiled eyes along the ring and found Resh at her station with her hand already resting on the discretion key, and something in his face shut even further. Warden of In, take your hand off that channel. The discretion channel existed so that a lane warden could speak directly to distressed registered traffic, a freighter with a dying drive, a tanker drifting off interval, and talk at home without committing the spine to anything. It was for registered traffic. The word registered was carved into the regulation the way names were carved into memorial steel. Prefect, Resh said, it has a passenger. It claims a passenger. It's asking for directions. Her own voice sounded strange to her, both hearts running offset the way they did before a fall. Nothing that came to spy asks the watchtower for directions. Nothing that came to die asks for the way home. You have your order, Warden? What Resh Aven did next would be cited, argued, cursed, and finally taught for longer than she lived. In the moment, it did not feel like history. It felt like the smallest motion in the world. 2 fingers, 1 key, the discretion channel opening with its soft double chime, and her own voice going out unencrypted into the priority lane where 1,100 hulls and 1 impossibility could hear it. Unregistered return. This is lane 11 control, she said. I hear you. Hold your interval and dim your drive. You are not cleared to Earth. You are not cleared anywhere, but I hear you. For 3 seconds, the contact transmitted nothing. On the board, its drive signature folded down obediently from a low burn to a coal exactly as instructed instantly, the way nothing piloted by pride ever moved. Then the small voice came back, alone this time, and it had stopped fraying. It said something quick and bright in its round, soft language, and the machine under it translated into clean cipher. And what the machine said was, she says, thank you, she says, you're the first one who answered. She says, we've been knocking for such a long time. On the Warden Ring of Corval Spire, nobody breathed. Out in the rail, the contact held its cold dim drive and waited, patient as a child outside a door, while the purge batteries finished charging beneath it. Kyrie did not relieve her. That was the first strange mercy of the night, and later Resh understood it was not mercy at all. The prefect was 40 years inside the regulations, and he knew, faster than anyone young would have, that the moment the contact answered her hail, the spine had a record of contact, and the record made her custodian of the conversation, and pulling her off the board mid-contact would itself have to be written down and defended for the rest of his career. The regulations were a cage that closed in every direction. He stood behind her station instead, close enough that she could hear the dry click of his breath vents, and said, "Everything through me, every word." "Yes, prefect." "And get me its hull," he said. "If we are going to burn it, we will write down what it was." That was how the first impossibility surfaced, 11 minutes into the watch, under the routine glare of an identification sweep. The contact was small, 41 meters, a needle and drum body, a sensor crown, a drive bell scaled for patience rather than speed. It was old. The architecture said so before any archive did. Lap-welded ring frames, externally trussed tankage, a communications mast that actually swiveled mechanically on bearings. It was a museum's idea of a spacecraft. The warden's recognition system chewed the silhouette, found nothing in the tariff registries, and then, because Corval Spire sat on the outermost spur of the third spine and kept the long archives, it reached back into the intelligence. Shelves nobody opened anymore, the passive catalog of the loud world. Every warden knew about the loud world, the way you know about weather on a planet you will never visit. A yellow star far beyond the veil, outside every lane, claimed by nobody. A species that had been spilling radio into the dark for a few centuries. Music, arguments, numbers, grief. Too far away to matter, too loud to ignore. The Imperium had never gone. The lanes did not run there. The spine's builders had never thrown a gate within 80 years' hard burn of it. And what the lanes did not touch, the Imperium did not want. The catalog existed because the Imperium wrote everything down. Intercepts, centuries of them, filed by listening posts that had long since automated their own boredom. The recognition system matched the silhouette in 4 seconds. "Prefect," Taz said, and his voice had gone wrong. "It's human." The word sat on the ring like a drop tool. Human, the loud world's name for itself, transliterated through 3 centuries of intercepts. "It's in the catalog," Taz went on, reading, both hands flat on his console as if the data might buck. Exact silhouette match. They broadcast schematics of it. They used to do that. Transmit their own blueprints in the clear, like hatchlings showing a drawing to the dark. Deep Survey Probe, their designation cartographer, hull number DSP-11, launched from a crude survey vessel called, he worked the transliteration, Thessaly. Mapping mission outbound toward the Hollow Reach. "When?" Kyrie said. Taz looked up. The membranes of his ears had folded flat. 331 years ago, he said. "Prefect, there's more. The catalog has the end of it. The humans broadcast that too. They broadcast everything, their disasters most of all. The Thessaly was lost with all hands at the Hollow's reach up margin. Drive collapse on an experimental transit. Their own search fleet found debris at the margin and called it total. 41 crew," he swallowed. "The probe was logged aboard at the time of loss. Destroyed with the ship, 331 years ago, control. The thing in our lane was destroyed 331 years ago." Resh looked at the board, at the patient coal of the contact's drive holding interval like a model student, and felt the night tilt under her. "Then it isn't the same hull,"
Kyrie said flatly. "It's a replica."
"Someone built a copy of a dead probe and taught it our cipher and sent it into my lane. That is not a mystery. That is a weapon with theater attached. Where is my purge authorization?" "Transmitted, Prefect. Marshal's office acknowledges. Solution is loading." "Spectrometry," Resh said. Kiri's eyes came around to her. "If it's a replica, the forging will say so," she said. "If it's the original, 3 centuries cold, the hull will say that too. Metal doesn't lie about its age. Before we burn it, let's be the Imperium that wrote down what it was." It was his own sentence handed back to him, and he knew it, and he let it stand. Sweep it. The deep resolution sweep took 2 minutes. The results came back, and Taz read them twice before he would speak them, and when he spoke them he did it quietly, like a man laying down something that might detonate. The hull of the cartographer was lap-welded, ring-framed, mechanically swiveled, 331 years old in every line of its architecture, and the metal itself had come out of a forge within the last 40 years. Not refurbished, not patched, all of it. Every plate, every weld, every bearing race, new. The isotope ratios were clean and recent and unlike any registered foundry signature in the spine in the Imperium, in the catalog of any species the Imperium had ever taxed, fought, or buried. The probe was an antique that had been built yesterday by nobody, out of metal from nowhere, and down in the drum of it, wrapped in shielding the sweep, could barely whisper through, there was heat. A small, steady, Warm-blooded signature, 15 kilograms of it, with a double pulse. No, not a double pulse. One heart beating fast the way small things' hearts beat. Biological, Taz said. Alive, one occupant. He stared at the screen, juvenile. The small voice on the open band spoke again, hopeful, worn smooth at the edges with repetition, asking. Resh now knew without any translation at all whether anyone could tell it the way home. Prefect, Resh said. The purge solution. Holding for authorization, Kyrie said. And for the first time in the 11 years, she would end up serving under and against, and finally beside him. Resh heard Dolmaskiri's voice do something it never did. It hesitated. The marshal's authorization arrived 50 minutes later, while the contact held its interval and the lane traffic flowed past it in metered beads. Every freighter crew in the rail by now illegally tuned to the open band, listening to a child knock on the outside of the Imperium. The authorization was clean and cold. Espionage return, cipher compromise class 1, civilian lane occupancy. Purge at Bastion discretion. The Spire's batteries, 11 of them, dug into the Needle's flanks, each one capable of opening a battleship like fruit. Acquired the 41-meter antique and held it in a firing basket so deep and so redundant that nothing inside it had ever survived. Bastion discretion. 2 words, and the whole weight of them came down on the watch floor, on a prefect with 40 years of regulation in his spine, in the small hours of the third watch, with a child's voice on the open band. Kyrie stood at the master rail and looked at the solution for a long time. Warden Avon, he said at last, you opened a discretion channel against my explicit order. That is on the record, and it will follow you, and depending on what the next hour holds, it may end you. He did not look at her. While it stands open, you are the contact warden of record, so you will ask it. Before I burn the first verified human artifact this Imperium has ever touched, with something alive inside it, you will ask it the only question that matters. Which question, Prefect? Ask it why it came here, Kyrie said. Of all the dark it could be lost in, ask it why my lane. Resh turned her aboard. Her hands, she noticed remotely, were steady. Behind her, the watch floor had gone silent enough that she could hear Veshent's radiation hissing in an unshielded speaker 2 stations down. She keyed the discretion channel. Cartographer, she said, and using its name out loud changed something in the room. She felt the change go through the floor like a draft. This is Lane 11 control. Answer plainly, you hold our cipher, you hold our language. You were destroyed 331 years ago, and your hull is whole 40 years old, and you are sitting in the most defended traffic lane of an empire your builders have never met. Why did you come here? Why this lane? The reply came back with no lag at all, which meant the machine had been waiting for exactly this question, possibly for years. Lane 11 control, the cartographer said in its dead-level borrowed cipher. We were given 3 instructions. 1, carry her gently. 2, follow the old roads as far as they go. 3, when the roads end, find a warden and ask. The ones who repaired us said the wardens of the spine are bound by a law older than the Imperium that owns them. They said, the wardens will know what to do with a foundling. They said it would be you. A pause, the first hesitation the machine had shown, as if even it found the next part heavy. Control, our drive is spent. The last margin was used, reaching your lane. We cannot leave. We cannot run. We are asking. The passenger is a human child. Her name is Edelyn. She is 9 years old. She has been asleep for 331 years, and she has been awake for 19 days, and she thinks the machine stopped itself. Say it, Resh said softly. She thinks she has been gone one night, the cartographer said. Please advise. The firing basket held. The batteries glowed in their housings like banked coals. On the open band, faint behind the machine's words, the small voice was humming nothing in particular to itself, the tuneless wandering sound of a child keeping her own courage in a quiet room, while every gun in the dark pointed at the room and waited to be told what the Imperium was. Resh Aven looked at the track on her board, at the stone the stream had brought her, and made the second irreversible decision of the night. She stood, faced her prefect across the watch floor, and spoke the words that no warden had spoken in 900 years, the words from the oldest page of the Lane Law, the page that survived every rewriting because the Guild had carried it from before the Imperium had a name. Prefect Kyrie. As contact warden of record, I declare salvage of the living under the statute of the drowned lane. Her voice did not shake. Both her hearts were shaking. What the lane carries alive, the warden delivers. I claim custody of the foundling Edelyn, and I bind this bastion as her carrier. The guns are now her escort. Tradition demanded the next part be done kneeling. The warden taking the floor's weight the way a carrier takes cargo. Resh knelt on the watch floor of Corval Spire in front of 40 wardens and 11 charged purge batteries, and put her open hand flat on the deck, and Dolmaskiri looked down at her with an expression she could not read at, all while 50 light-years of command lattice began very quietly to catch fire with the news. Out in the rail, the antique held its interval, and inside it a child who believed she had been gone one night hummed to herself and waited for directions home. The statute of the drowned lane ran 4 sentences. It predated the Imperium by 4 dynasties, predated the Hadron claim on the spine, predated, the scholars admitted. In footnotes, they preferred nobody read the Hadron's arrival on the spine at all. It said the lanes carry. It said what the lane brings alive. The warden delivers to its own. It said the carriage is sacred and the cargo owes nothing. And it said, in the oldest grammar the language possessed, a gun raised against carried life is raised against the road itself. For 900 years it had been a relic, recited at guild investitures, embroidered on ceremonial sashes, invoked by exactly no one, because for 900 years no living thing had ever drifted into a lane that did not already belong to a registry and a tax bracket. The law schools called it beautiful and dead. Reshaven had just used it to point 11 purge batteries the other way. Prefect Kyrie took one step toward her kneeling form, and the watch floor braced for the end of her career. Olentaz told the story for the rest of his life, and he always told it the same way. The old man looked down at her, and his vents went flat and silent, and you could see 40 years of regulation grinding against 4 sentences that were older than all of it. And then the prefect did the arithmetic that made him the prefect. Log it, Kyrie said. Statute invocation, custody declared, Warden Avon standing carrier of record, batteries to escort posture. His voice was gravel poured over ice. And get me the marshal's office back. They are going to want to know why my bastion has just adopted a human. He looked down at Resh once more. Get off the floor, Warden, he said quietly. Carriers carry standing. The next hours moved the way water moves through a breaking dam, slow at the crack, then all at once. The custody record went out on the command lattice as the statute demanded, in the clear to all parties of the carriage, to the guild registry at the spine's heart, to the marshal of the third spine, to the arbiter of the carriage court, and because the law was older than encryption and said so, to the lane itself, every hull in the rail receiving the 4 sentences and the name of the cargo. Etta Lynn, the record said in transliterated Hadron, foundling, alive, bound for Earth. 1,100 freighter crews read it at their stations. By morning, the whole third spine had read it. By the second morning, there was not a deckhand in the Imperium who did not know that something 3 centuries dead had knocked on lane 11 and asked the way home, and that a third watch warden had answered, and that the old law had teeth after all. But that was later. First, there was the conversation. It began 40 minutes after the statute, when the legal channel quieted and Kyrie, pacing the master rail with the slow, heavy tread of a man, memorizing the wording of his own court-martial, stopped behind Resha Station and said, "You are her carrier. A carrier inspects the cargo. Talk to it. Establish the passenger's condition. Everything through translation, everything logged." Resh keyed the channel. She had been rehearsing the question for an hour, and it still came out nothing like a regulation. "Cartographer, this is your warden. I'd like to speak with Etta. Will she speak with me? She has been asking us the same about you," the machine said, "since you answered." There was a soft rustle of channel change, the acoustic bloom of a small pressurized space, and then the voice was there, live, unwrapped from its recorded patience, close in a way the broadcasts had not been. Behind it, Resh could hear a faint mechanical purring, air cyclers, the held breath of a tiny ship. "Hello?" the voice said in its round, soft tongue, and the cartographer's translation ran under it, half a beat behind, flat and faithful. "Are you the lady from the tower? The watch floor of Corval Spire, 40 wardens, 11 batteries." The accumulated procedural dignity of the Hadron Imperium held absolutely still. "I am," Resh said. "My name is Resh. I'm a lane warden. Do you know what that is?" "Like a crossing guard," Etta said after the translation went the other way. Then doubtful, "But for space." The cartographer appended deadpan. "The comparison is structurally accurate." "Yes," Resh said. "A crossing guard for space." "Etta, I have to ask you some questions. Boring ones. It's my job. Is that all right?" "Okay, Mr. Cardo helps if the words are hard." A pause then, with the abrupt total trust that Resh would learn was simply how the girl was built. "Your voice is nice. It's kind of buzzy. Like bees, but nice ones." A warden 3 stations down made a sound and turned it into a cough. Resh looked at her own gray 4-fingered hand on the console and discovered it was not entirely steady after all. "Thank you," she said gravely. "Yours is nice too." First question, "Are you hurt anywhere?" "No. I get headaches sometimes when I wake up. Mr. Cardo says it's the long sleep wearing off, like when your foot's asleep, only it's all of me." "Are you eating, drinking?" "There's paste. It's not bad. The orange one's the best one. There's 19 orange ones left, I counted." 19 days awake, Resh thought, and she counts the orange ones. "And the water tastes like nothing. But Mr. Cardo says that means it's working." "Good. Are you afraid?" The pause was longer this time. When the answer came, it had the careful precision of a child who has decided to be honest and brave at the same time. and is discovering the cost of doing both at once. A little, not of you, a breath. It's taking really long. Mom said it would feel like one sleep and then we'd all be home. And I did the sleep right. I did everything right, but it's been days and days now and nobody's come and Mr. Cardo won't say how far it is anymore. He just says soon, and he's a really bad liar for a robot. The voice dropped, conspiratorial, devastating. I think we might be more lost than he tells me. Can you not tell him I said that? He tries really hard. Resh closed her eyes for 1 second. On the master rail, Prefect Dolmas Kyre, 40 years of regulation, stood with his head bowed over the track display like a man at a graveside. I won't tell him, Resh said. Etta, listen to me. You're not lost anymore. You found the road. That's my road you're on, and I'm the crossing guard, and nobody gets lost on my road. We're going to work out the way to Earth. It might take some days. There will be a lot of grown-ups arguing. That part will be boring. But you found the road. Do you understand? Another silence, and then a small wet laugh, the sound of 19 days of held together coming apart all at once into relief. And the girl on the dead probe in the firing basket of Corvalspire said, okay. Mom always says if you get lost, you find a person with a uniform whose job it is, and you stay right there with them, and you don't wander off. Your mother is exactly right. Are you wearing a uniform? Resh looked down at her warden grays, the rank band of a 3rd grade, the lowest commission stripe the guild issued. Sitting alone on her forearm. I am, she said. It's gray. There's a stripe. Then I'll stay right here, Edelyn said, with the whole weight of a promise. And out on the board, her 41-meter antique held its interval, coal dim, obedient, 331 years and uncounted impossible distances from a kitchen where somebody had taught her what to do if she ever got lost. It was Taz who put the next impossibility on the table, because it was Taz who thought to ask the probe the question every warden asks a hull in custody. State your route. The cartographer answered the way it answered everything, instantly, completely, and in a manner that detonated quietly under everything the Imperium believed about itself. It transmitted its charts, not charts of human space, charts of the spine, the whole spine, not the 3rd spine, the spine, the entire gravity rail network in all its branches, gate by gate, lane by lane, junction by junction, rendered in a notation no Hadron had ever seen, and every Hadron cartographer could read at a glance, because the geometry was the geometry, and the geometry was perfect. And threaded through the familiar network like veins under known skin, the chart showed lanes that did not exist, dead spurs, closed gates. Rails the Imperium had written off as ruined 1,000 years ago, or had never found at all, drawn in the same calm hand as Lane 11, annotated in a small, precise script that the linguistic engines could not even segment, and marked, every one of them, with the same 2 symbols the probe had painted beside its own route in. It came up a dead lane, Taz said. His voice was doing the thing again, the gone-wrong flatness. Prefect control, the Veshant spur dead ends at the old gate. The old gate has been sealed since before the conquest. It's a tomb. We hang tariff arrays off its corpse. There is no rail beyond it. Everyone knows there's no rail beyond it. He pulled the probe's route track and threw it on the main display, and everybody looked at the thin, clean line running in from the outer dark, through gates that did not open, down rails that did not exist, terminating in Lane 11's priority channel. It didn't drift in past the pickets. There is no picket gap. It came through the old gate. The old gate opened for it. The silence on the floor had a different texture now. Wardens lived their whole lives on the spine and never thought about it, the way you do not think about your own skeleton. And the probe's chart had just turned the skeleton over and shown them all how much of it they had. Never been told about. The spine was old. Every Hadron knew the spine was old. The Imperium taught its children, with great ceremony and very carefully chosen verbs, that the Hadron people had mastered the lane network. Mastered, that beautiful load-bearing word, doing the work that conquered or inherited or found would have done less flatteringly. The first wardens, the ones who had actually thrown the gates across 50 light-years of dark and strung the rails between them, were a paragraph in the histories. Vanished, attributes unknown, presumed extinct for epochs. The guild's oldest oaths descended from fragments attributed to them. The statute of the drowned lane was one of those fragments. The probe's chart was drawn in their hand. The small, precise script was theirs. The old gate had opened for it because the cartographer had come, quite literally, with the keys, and when Resh asked the probe directly, flat-voiced, both hearts hammering, who repaired you, who gave you the charts, who taught you our cipher, the machine answered with the simple terribleness of a thing that had been told to be honest with wardens. She calls them the quiet people. They did not give us a name for themselves. They gave us the roads and the keys, and 3 instructions and a message, a pause. The message is for the wardens of the spine. We were told to deliver it only when a warden stood as carrier under the old law. Control, that is now you. The watch floor turned, all of it, every double-pupiled eye, to the third watch warden with one stripe on her arm. "Deliver it," Resh said. The message was 11 words. The linguistic engines would spend years on the recording of the original, getting nowhere. What the probe spoke aloud was its own translation into current lane cipher, and the 11 words came out of the speakers of Corval Spire into a silence like deep water, and stayed there. "We kept her alive. The road is yours now. Carry well." Kyrie stood looking at the main display for a long moment. Then he straightened, and his vents flattened, and he became, Resh watched it happen, the visible transformation of a man deciding which thing he is, entirely and only a prefect of the Hadron. Imperium with an impossible object in his firing basket and a political reactor going critical 50 light-years up the command lattice. "Marshal Drask's flag detachment jumped from 3rd Spine anchorage 19 minutes ago," he said. 12 hulls. He will be at this bastion in 2 days. Until then, nothing changes. Custody stands. The batteries hold escort posture. The cargo, the word came out of him strangely, half regulation and half something else. The cargo gets her sleep. He looked at Resh, Warden Avon, with me. There is one more question we ask tonight, and we ask it off the open band. In the small armored conference blister off the watch floor, under a single work lamp, the old prefect put the question that the catalog could not answer and the marshal would ask first. "The humans," he said, "the loud world. 300 years of intercepts, and I need the only thing that matters by morning. When they learn we have her, and they will learn, the lattice leaks like a basket. What comes up that dead lane after her, Warden? What does that species send?" Resh thought of the small voice counting orange paste tubes. She thought of the catalog centuries deep, every transmission filed, the music, the arguments, the numbers, the grief. She had been pulling intercepts for 6 hours between every other duty, reading the loud world's own loud heart. And there was one pattern in it that repeated so reliably you could have set a chronometer by it. And it was the only pattern that mattered now. "Prefect," she said, "everything in the catalog says the same thing. They are a species that goes back for their dead. 3 centuries of transmissions and it never changes. They dig out the buried, they drain the seas for one hull, they spend fleets on bones." She met his eyes. "And we don't have their dead, Prefect. We have their child alive. There is no force in their history they would not send. If we carry her well, that force arrives as gratitude. And if we carry her badly, then I think we learn why their star is called the Loud World," Resh said, "and I think we learn it inside a year." Kyrie was silent for a long moment. The work lamp hummed. 50 light-years away, a marshal's flag detachment was burning toward them with its own answer already drafted. And neither of them knew yet that the question was already obsolete. Because the cartographer, patient and honest and bound by 3 instructions, had not waited for the Imperium to decide whether to tell Earth. It had already knocked on that door too. The discovery surfaced the next day, in the dull middle of a records audit, when a junior signals warden cross-checking the probe's route against the spur arrays found an anomaly in the old gate's tariff relays. The dead arrays the Imperium hung off the sealed gate like instruments on a corpse, pointed outward at nothing, logging the static of the outer dark. 11 days before the cartographer entered Lane 11, the corpse had transmitted one burst, 8 seconds. Enormous power, drawn from gate reserves the Imperium did not know the gate still held, aimed with surveyor's precision along a bearing no Hadron transmission had ever used. Out past the veil, out into the unclaimed dark, on a heading that the catalog's astrographers confirmed within the hour, their voices going carefully neutral as they did. The bearing of the yellow star, the loud world, Earth. The burst itself was recorded in the relay's buffer, and when they unwrapped it, it was not in cipher, and it was not from the Imperium. It was a human voice, a child's voice, patient, recorded, repeating in its round, soft language the same message Lane 11 had heard, with one addition. After the asking, after the way home, came a string of numbers in an antique human format, and the cartographer's hull designation, and a single sentence the linguist rendered, and re-rendered, and could not make any less enormous. "This is cartographer, daughter of Thessaly, carrying Edelin alive. We are coming up the old road. Meet us at the door." It called ahead, Tass said, into the stillness. 300 years we never threw one signal at that star, and the gate, our gate, called ahead, to them. "On its own, not on its own," Resh said. She was looking at the route chart, the thin, clean line, the 2 small symbols painted at every junction by hands that had vanished epochs ago and apparently never stopped working. 3 instructions. Carry her gently. Follow the old roads. Ask the wardens. The quiet people didn't send a probe into our lane, Taz. They sent a delivery, and they sent the notice of delivery, and they used our own gate as the post horn. We're not the destination. She felt the shape of it settle over her. Cold and vast. We're the carrier. The whole Imperium. They addressed the package through us. Kyrie stood at the rail with his hands locked behind him, gray and still. 11 days before it arrived, he said. That signal is 11 days gone toward their star at burst speed, plus however their relays run. Warden Avon. Your species that goes back for its dead. He turned. How long do I have? It was already on her board. She had been running the numbers since the buffer opened. The catalog's data on human drive emissions. The distance past the veil. The antique relay chain's humanity had been seeding outward for 3 centuries in the loud, blind hope that someone would ever want to talk back. If their relays carried it clean, Earth heard the burst 30 hours ago, Resch said. What they send depends on what they believe. And Prefect, there's a problem with what they believe. It's in the catalog. She put the intercept file on the main display. It was 330 years old, one of the oldest entries in the Thessaly section. The Loud World's own broadcast from the year after the loss, when their search fleet had come back from the Hollow Reach margin with debris in its holds, and the species had done its public grieving in the open spectrum the way it did everything. Their search fleet recovered hull fragments at the jump margin, Resch said. Their engineers published the survey. Look at the fracture analysis. The display bloomed with antique human imaging. Torn plates, sheared frames, edges rendered in obsessive metallurgical detail. Those aren't collapse fractures. Half those edges are cut. Clean, directed, energetic cuts, the kind a salvage tool makes, or a weapon. Engineers saw it 3 centuries ago. They published it and argued about it for a generation. The official findings stayed drive collapse because the alternative had no suspect. She let the silence carry it the rest of the way. As of 30 hours ago, the alternative has a suspect. A child of the Thessaly calls ahead from inside an alien empire nobody on Earth has ever heard of, alive, in custody behind our guns. Their oldest open wound just got an address, Prefect. They're not coming to ask how we found her. They're coming to ask what we did to that ship. The watch floor absorbed that. And the truth, Kyrie said. Which is what? Because I now command a bastion holding evidence in a 300-year-old massacre I learned about yesterday, and I find I would like to know if my Imperium did it. The Imperium has never thrown a hull past the veil. That's in our own records. And for once I believe them, we don't go where the lanes don't run. Resch pulled the route chart back up. The clean line, the patient annotations. The cuts are salvage cuts. I'd stake the stripe on it. Something took that wreck apart at the margin with surgical tools, fast, while it was still bleeding air. Because something was cutting its way to a sealed survey bay with a live child inside before her cold sleep margin ran out. She looked at the 2 small symbols. The quiet people didn't find a derelict, Prefect. They answered one. 331 years ago, something heard the Thessaly die and went and cut her open and saved the only thing aboard that could still be saved. And then spent 3 centuries doing whatever it is they did, learning where she belonged, rebuilding her ship around her like a shell, waiting maybe for the roads to be ready. She stopped, because the next sentence had arrived unbidden, and she found she believed it. They did our oath, Prefect. Before we knew there was anything to deliver. What the lane brings alive, the Warden delivers. We didn't invoke the old law on them. They invoked it on us. Marshal Ovendrast arrived the following day with 12 hulls, a flagstaff of 40, and the verdict already written. Resch watched the flag detachment take station from the Warden Ring, heavy interdictors in escort diamond, the Marshal's flagship spine of conquest holding the apex, the whole formation executing its approach with the contemptuous precision of a fleet that has never once been asked a question it couldn't answer with tonnage. Drast himself came aboard Corval Spire in full honors, an old officer built like a gate pillar, rank bands from wrist to shoulder on both arms, and the first thing he did, before his boots had cooled from the shuttle, was order the open band severed. The Imperium does not conduct its business with an audience, he said, on the watch floor, into the careful silence of 40 wardens who had spent 3 days listening to a child hum to herself between conversations. The intrusion object goes silent until disposition. That is first. The second thing he did was convene disposition, in the Spire Strategium, with Kyrie, the Bastion's senior staff, his own flag council, and because the statute forced it, and his jaw worked visibly as the protocol officer explained why, Warden 3rd Grade Reshevin, carrier of record, the lowest-ranked individual to attend a marshal's disposition in the recorded history of the 3rd Spine. Drast laid it out without sitting down. Item, he said. An object of foreign manufacture penetrated the spine through infrastructure this Imperium, believed sealed using keys this Imperium does not possess, demonstrating that an unknown power can open our roads at will. That is not a foundling. That is a proof of concept. Item. The object holds charts of the entire network, including military rail, in a notation predating the conquest. Charts which, if they reach any rival power, end the Imperium's monopoly on the spine inside a generation. Item. The object has already transmitted toward a foreign species an invitation to arrive at our outermost gate An invitation we did not authorize and cannot retract. Item. His double pupils came around to Resh and fixed. A junior warden has bound this bastion under a ceremonial statute to protect the object, advertise its cargo, and await the arrival of an alien fleet. Disposition follows. The passenger is removed to flag custody as a ward of the Imperium. We are not barbarians. The object is scuttled in place, charts and all, before it can speak to anyone else. The dead lane is collapsed at the old gate with charges, permanently. And when the foreign fleet arrives at a sealed door, it finds nothing. No object, no gate, no proof, no story. Whatever they suspect, they will be staring at vacuum, 80 years burned from home, and they will turn around. The Imperium remains what the Imperium has always been, closed. He set both fists on the table. The Marshal's office thanks the Bastion for its diligence, execution within the day. The silence that followed had 40 years of rank inside it. Resh looked at Kyrie. Kyrie was looking at the table. The Flag Council was already drafting. Marshal, Resh said, and felt every gram of the single stripe on her forearm. The statute is a guild embroidery warden, and the guild serves at the Imperium's pleasure. The statute is the only reason the gate opened. It came out of her flat, fast, before fear could file it down, and it landed. Drast's vents stilled. Down the table, the Flag Council's stylist stopped. Explain that, Drast said. The quiet people had the keys to every gate in the spine, Marshal. They had the rails, the ciphers, the charts. They could have delivered her anywhere, into the spine's heart, over your capital, past every picket you own, and you'd have learned about it from a tariff log. Instead, they brought her up a dead lane to the outermost bastion of your most junior spur, dimmed her drive, and had her ask, Marshal, for instruction. From a warden. Resh kept her eyes on his because looking away now would end it. Everything about the delivery is a test of one thing, whether the law they left on this road still lives, whether what they built still does what it was built to do, carry and deliver and hold its guns off carried life. They didn't have to knock. They knocked because the knock is the question. She put her palm flat on the table, carrier's gesture taking the weight. Scuttle the probe, seal the gate, lie to the species that comes looking, and we will have answered the question, Marshal. The wrong way. To the entities that own the keys to every road in the Imperium, who can open them at will. You said it yourself. Item 1. What does the Imperium's monopoly on the spine rest on, the day the spine's builders conclude we are no longer fit to hold it? You are speculating about ghosts, Warden. 11 days ago, a sealed gate drew power from reserves we can't find and made a precision transmission. On its own authority, Marshal. The ghosts are operational. The only question left is what they're watching us do. Kyrie spoke for the first time, without raising his head from the table. There is also the human fleet, he said mildly into the room Resh had cracked open. Marshal, with respect, I have read the catalog, 3 centuries of it. My contact warden's assessment of that species is on file, and I endorse every word. If they arrive at a sealed door and vacuum, they will not turn around. Their entire civilizational record states that they do not turn around. They will sit at that gate for a year, taking it apart molecule by molecule, and they will find charge residue and a collapsed lane with a hot scuttle signature inside it and the last known position of a living child of theirs behind it. We will have transformed a delivery into a murder scene, and we will have done it to the single species in the catalog whose response to a murder scene is total, sustained, multi-generational mobilization. He looked up at last. Or, alternative disposition, we carry the cargo to the door and hand it across. And the most dangerous species in the intercept record meets the Imperium for the first time in history in the one and only posture from which the Imperium cannot lose, giving them back their child, alive, carried well, every gun dark. The old prefect's voice did not change at all as he drove it home. One of these dispositions begins their oldest story about us with gratitude, Marshal. The other begins it with a grave. They are a species of long stories. Choose which one we open. Drast stood at the head of the table for a long time, fists planted, the political reactor running visibly behind his eyes. And Resh understood, watching him, that none of it had touched the core of him, that the core of him was tonnage and the sealed door instinct of 900 years, and that they had won nothing here except time. Disposition is suspended pending referral, Drast said at last, each word a door closing. The carriage court has claimed review of the statute invocation. The arbiter is inbound. Until the court rules, custody stands, the object stays silent, and nothing moves on that lane without flag authorization. He straightened, and his gaze crossed Resh's one final time, and it held the precise temperature of the void. Enjoy the stripe, Warden. The court convenes in 6 days. The human fleet, by your own arithmetic, arrives in 12. We will see which of us the calendar loves. The days under the flag seal were the strangest of the whole carriage, and the spur never forgot them. Drast's order stood, the open band severed, the cartographer silent until disposition. What the order could not reach was everything else. Resh, as carrier of record, retained one sanctioned welfare contact per watch. The Flag Council had tried to strike it and discovered, to his visible pain, that the statute predated the concept of striking things, and so once per watch, on a sealed channel with 3 sensors listening, the lady from the tower checked on her cargo. The sensors logs from those days were eventually published in both empires, and they contain no secrets at all. They contain a child asking whether hadrons have birthdays, and a warden explaining hatch days, and both parties agreeing the other arrangement sounded better. They contain a full watch spent on the rules of a card game from a kitchen 300 years gone, reconstructed from memory, adapted for 4-fingered hands. They contain on the 3rd day a count, 11 orange ones left. It was the count that broke the blockade, because the count got out. Sensors are crews too, and the spur, which had been listening to that small voice for days before the seal came down and had not stopped thinking about it since, did the arithmetic of paste tubes and decided, in the leaderless, unanimous way of working crews everywhere, that this would not stand. The guild tender that delivered Corval Spire's routine stores that week carried an unmanifested crate, and the crate carried 41 tubes of fruit paste from 11 different freighter galleys, none of them orange, because nobody knew the recipe, and every one of them an attempt at it, cooked by ore hauler crews who had pulled the Loud World's antique food broadcasts out of the catalog and argued about reduction temperatures over tariff channels for 3 days. The Flag Council impounded the crate as unauthorized contact. The impound order lasted 9 hours, which was how long it took the story to cross the spur and come back as a question the Council had no appetite to answer in writing. Confirm for the record, Council, the Imperium's official position is that the foundling gets no dessert. The crate went through. The censor's log of the next welfare contact records the cargo of the carriage of Etta Lynn conducting a formal blind tasting on the sealed channel, awarding first place to Hull KV 1141, an ore hauler out of the Vesh and Ballast runs whose cook had come nearest the lost apricot, and the spurs, freighter crews, 1,100 hulls of the most tariff-hardened, empire-proofed, professionally unsentimental spacers on the spine, adopting her on the spot and entirely without permission. For the rest of the carriage, Hull KV 141 flew with a small stenciled sunburst at its bow, orange, and so within a month did half the working hulls on the spur, and the Flag Council filed no finding about it whatsoever, having learned his arithmetic. 300 years later, the sunburst is still there. It is on the registry seal of Eddie's Road and on the Warden's Academy crest above Kyrie's 4 sentences and stenciled, orange regulation size, entirely without regulation, at the bow of every guild hall that has ever carried a foundling home. Ask any deckhand on the spine what it means and you will get the same answer in any language. It means the lane feeds its cargo. He was wrong about the calendar by 9 full days, because the calendar had not read the catalog. Earth did not deliberate for a week and then dispatch a measured embassy. Earth, as the catalog could have told anyone who asked it, had kept the Thessaly's case open on its books for 331 years, had renewed the search statute every generation as a ritual of identity, had built and rebuilt the relay chains outward in the dead ship's direction, the way other species build temples. And Earth had heard a child of the Thessaly say alive in an 8-second burst from an unmapped gate in the outer dark. The human fleet jumped within 19 hours of the signal reaching Sol. It arrived at the old gate on the 3rd day after Drast disposition, not in 12 days, not at relay speed, not by any drive physics the catalog contained. And to the first the Hadron Imperium knew of it was the picket array at the dead end of the dead lane, screaming on every band at once, and then going very quiet as the outer dark beyond the sealed gate filled up with engine light. Resh was on the ring when the picket feed came through. She would remember the image the rest of her life, the way the previous watch remembered the first hail. The corpse-gray arch of the old gate in the foreground hung with the Imperium's dead tariff arrays, and behind it, out in the unclaimed black where no lane ran and nothing was supposed to be able to navigate at all, a formation resolving out of its own deceleration burn. Heavy hulls, blunt and scarred and graceless, built in a brutal bolted architecture 3 centuries diverged from the antique in her firing basket, but speaking the same engineering language, armored like things that expected to be hit, marked in white antique numerals, holding a perfect parade interval that was its own kind of message. At the formation's heart, dwarfing its escorts, lay a carrier. 2.5 kilometers of slab flank and launch deck, its hull the color of storm iron, its bow blazoned with a name the catalog's transliteration engine rendered into Hadron even as the watch floor stared. Ex-Bellwether. And from it, on the open band, in the flat calm of a voice that has been rehearsed against grief for 300 years, the Hadron Imperium received the first transmission ever addressed to it by the human species. The linguist did not need to translate it. The cartographer, silent under flag seal in the firing basket, woke without authorization and translated it for them, and nothing Drask's staff did could shut it off. Unknown Empire on the Old Road. This is Commodore Lila Reyes, Earth Coalition ship Bellwether, commanding the Thessaly Recovery Group. 331 years ago, we lost a ship at your doorstep with 41 souls and a child aboard. 11 days ago, that child called home from behind your guns. We are not here to open relations. We are not here for your roads or your worlds. We are here for Etta Lynn. A pause, exactly long enough to be deliberate. Records of the Thessaly's hull show cutting damage. We have waited 3 centuries to learn who held the torch. We are arriving unarmed posture, weapons cold at the door she named. Do not make us knock twice. The stratagem of Corval Spire spent the next hour learning what 3 centuries of intercepts had failed to teach anyone, because nobody had thought the lesson would ever be needed. What it feels like to share a sky with the loud world. The first lesson was the jump. Drask's flag astrographers attacked the arithmetic from 6 directions and it would not yield. The human formation had crossed the distance from Sol to the Old Gate, a distance the Imperium's own survey corps rated at 80 years hard burn, a distance with no lanes, no rails, no gates, no infrastructure of any kind in under 10 days, arriving with enough reaction mass in reserve to hold station indefinitely. The conclusion stood at the bottom of every calculation like a stone at the bottom of a well, and the flagstaff kept walking around it, and it kept being there. The Hadron Imperium did not travel through space, it traveled through the spine. Its ships were lanecraft, superb, ancient, utterly bound. Off the rails they could waddle between close moons and nothing more. The Imperium's power, its tariffs, its conquests, its 900 years, all of it rested on a single fact. In 50 light years of dark, there was no way to get anywhere except the roads, and the Imperium held the roads. The humans had no roads, the humans had come anyway. Field drive, Taz said softly on the ring, watching the storm iron carrier hold its parade interval over the corpse of the gate. Their own physics. 300 years ago, they were welding ring frames by hand, and the catalog's been filing their drive research under theoretical curiosities. Ever since, because nobody read past the abstracts. They built ships that don't need the spine, Resh. His vents flared, half terror and half something that was almost laughter. We've been sitting on the only roads in the dark for 900 years, telling ourselves that owning the roads is the same thing as owning the dark. And the first species to come visiting just walked across the grass. The second lesson was the posture. The human formation held beyond the gate, weapons verifiably cold, launch decks sealed, transponders broadcasting identity in the clear, and every hull in it angled so that its dorsal batteries, cold as they were, bore precisely on the gate's arch. Courtesy and capability in the same geometry. We knocked, the formation said in the universal grammar of fleets. We did not have to. The third lesson arrived on the open band 11 minutes after the first, when Marshal Drask's flag communications following doctrine answered Commodore Reyes with a standard interdiction format. Identify yourselves, withdraw beyond the survey line, await processing, and the Bellwether replied by not replying. To the flagship. The carrier's next transmission stepped politely around the spine of Conquest's entire command lattice and addressed itself, by name, to a third watch warden with 1 stripe. This transmission is for Warden Resh Avon, Lane 11 Control Corval Spire, the human carrier said, in the cartographer's running translation. Warden Avon, Etta told us about you. She told us a lady from the tower answered when nobody else would, and said the words "nobody gets lost on my road," and wears a gray uniform with a stripe, and that she promised to stay right where you told her to stay. We are informed by our council that under the oldest law of your network, you personally stand as carrier of record for our citizen. A pause. Commodore Reyes states the following for your log. Earth recognizes the carriage. Earth will deal with the carrier. We will speak with you, Warden, and with whoever you vouch for, and with no one else. In the stratagem, the silence around Marshal Oven Drast acquired edges. They are inside our protocol, the Flag Council said, scrolling the statute with the expression of someone discovering a trapdoor in a floor he had walked for 40 years. Marshal, they've read it back to us correctly. The carriage binds the carrier personally. If we override the Warden, we void the custody, and voiding the custody with their fleet at the gate and their citizen behind our batteries is, I can read aboard, Council, Drast said. He stood at the strategem's master display for a long moment, watching the storm iron carrier hold its interval, and Resh, summoned back to the room she had been thrown out of 2 days prior, watched the arithmetic of tonnage fail behind his eyes for the second time. When he turned to her, his voice had the flatness of a man signing something under protest in front of witnesses. Warden Avon, the Imperium requires a conduit and the enemy has selected you. Note that I say enemy because that is what they are until the moment they are not, and that moment will be of the Imperium's choosing, not yours. You will speak with their commander. You will agree to nothing, concede nothing, confirm nothing regarding the object, the gate, or the charts. You will establish their intentions and report. Council will script you. No, Marshal. The word went through the strategium like a pressure drop. Drast's vents flattened. Repeat that, Warden. Council will not script me, Marshal, and I will not lie to them. Not because I am not loyal, but because it cannot work. She kept her voice level and her palm flat on the strategium table, the carrier's gesture taking the weight. 300 years of the catalog. Marshal, and the single most consistent finding in all of it is that they document everything, and they forget nothing. Whatever I tell them today will be checked against every fact they ever learn about us for the next 1,000 years. The first sentence Earth ever hears from the Hadron Imperium is going to be load-bearing for 10 centuries. Make it a true one. She looked up and met the old Marshal's eyes and laid down the only credential she had. I answered a hail I was ordered not to answer because something was lost and asking for help. That is the entire reason they will talk to me. The moment I read from Council's script, I become the Imperium that sealed the band, and we lose the only channel that species will ever trust. Let me be what the law already made me, Marshal. Let me be the carrier. Carriers don't negotiate cargo. They deliver it. The court has not ruled that you may deliver anything. Then let me say that, Marshal, the truth. That her carriage is real, that her custody holds, that my Imperium is deciding, and that while it decides, no one will touch her. Resh held his gaze. Or write your script, override the law, and explain to the species with the field drive and the open grief why the child's voice went silent the day their fleet arrived. It was Arbiter Selaverne who broke the deadlock because the carriage court it developed had not waited for its scheduled convening. The Arbiter had been aboard a fast guild packet since the hour the custody record hit the lattice, a figure so old that her rank bands had faded to Ghost Gray, the senior-most jurist of a court that had not heard a live carriage case in 200 years, and her packet docked at Corval Spire. That night, unannounced, while the Marshal's staff were still drafting protests, she heard arguments for one day. Drast's counsel argued security, sovereignty, the charts, the gate, the precedent. Kyrie, to the visible surprise of the flagstaff, argued the catalog, entered the whole Thessaly intercept file into the record, and made the court listen to 4 minutes of it, the antique grief of a loud species, the renewal of the search statute generation after generation, the relay chains built outward like temples. Resh argued last and shortest. She entered one exhibit, the recording of the first hail, the small voice, fraying and patient, asking the way home. The 11 words of the quiet people, we kept her alive, the road is yours now, carry well. Arbiter Selaverne ruled the following morning, standing in the oldest grammar the language possessed, and the ruling ran to 1 page. The statute of the drowned lane was found to be neither ceremonial nor obsolete, but the founding condition of the guild's tenure on the spine. The term of the lease, the arbiter said, under which every gate we hold was left to us. The carriage of Edelin was found valid. The custody of Warden Reshaven was confirmed. The cargo would be delivered to its own at the old gate under guild escort with all deliberate speed, and any party of any rank who raised a weapon against the carriage would stand outside the law of the road, with everything that had meant for 9,000 years. The court notes in closing, Selaverne said, her ghost-gray eyes moving from Drast to Resh to the window where Vescient's amber storms turned in the dark, that this case is the first in the guild's records in which the statute has operated exactly as written. The court has spent its life among laws that exist to be argued. It is the court's privilege, once before it dies, to read one that exists to be obeyed. The carriage will proceed. We are being watched by the landlord's children. Carry well. Resh transmitted the ruling to the bellwether herself, unscripted, with Drast's staff listening to every word and powerless under the court's seal to amend any of them. She stated the truth in order, the custody, the ruling, the escort, the timetable. 3 days to rig the spent probe for lane tow. The cartographer's drive was finished, burned to the last gram reaching lane 11, and the antique would have to ride a guild tender's cradle up the spur. 1 day of transit to the old gate. Handover at the arch on the 5th day under the statute, every gun on the lane dark by order of the carriage court. The reply from the human carrier took longer than usual. When it came, the Commodore's rehearsed flatness had developed a hairline cracked down its center. Warden Avon, Commodore Reyes, your message is received and will be relayed to Earth entire, and I am instructed by my own better judgment to tell you something before the diplomats sand the edges off it. A breath, audible across the translation. 331 years, Warden. We have a wall in our capital with 42 names on it, the 41, and hers. My government renewed the search statute 11 times. My grandmother's grandmother stood post on a relay that existed for no reason except that someday the Thessaly might speak. Nobody believed it. Everybody built it anyway. And the first voice to ever come back down that line told us she was alive and lost, and that somebody with a nice buzzy voice had answered her and promised that nobody gets lost on her road. The crack widened, and the commodore of the recovery group led it. We came expecting to bargain with an empire for our dead, Warden. We find a crossing guard delivering our child. The coalition will be at the arch on the 5th day, weapons cold. And Warden, Etta asks, and I am required by the chain of command of one 9-year-old to relay the question verbatim. Will the lady from the tower be the one who brings her across? Resh looked at the board, at the firing basket where the antique sat silent under flags sealed with a child asleep inside it, at the dead spur running out to the corpse-gray arch and the storm iron fleet beyond it. Tell Etta, she said, that carrier's Carrie. I'll bring her across myself. It was of all the sentences spoken at the old gate that month, the only one that every party, the Imperium, the coalition, the court, the quiet people if they were listening, and one small girl counting orange paste tubes in a rebuilt survey bay, heard in exactly the same way. And it was the sentence Marshal Oven Drast was replaying alone in the Strategium that night when he began to draft the order that nearly burned everything down. But before the order, before the transit, before the arch, there was the boarding, and the boarding was where the mystery finally opened all the way to the bottom. The terms were negotiated in a day, which the diplomats on both sides later called miraculous, and which Resh privately attributed to the fact that neither negotiating party wanted anything except the same thing. Before handover, joint verification, a human medical team would confirm the passenger's condition. The carrier of record would conduct the lawful inspection of cargo and vessel. Everything would be recorded by both sides simultaneously, so that no version of this story could ever be told two ways. The coalition sent an envoy shuttle through the old gate under Guild Beacon, the first human-piloted craft ever to ride a lane of the spine, threading the dead spur behind a Warden Pathfinder while every tariff array on the route, dead for 9 centuries, lit up one by one as it passed and tracked it like turning heads. Nobody ever explained that. By then, nobody on the spur was asking for explanations anymore. The shuttle carried 3 humans, a flight officer who stayed with the craft, a coalition physician doctor, Asha Okonkwo, gray-templed and immensely calm, and the recovery group's contact officer, Lieutenant Theo Brandt, who was 26 years old and had been chosen, Resh learned much later, from among 200 volunteers because his psychological file contained the phrase tested lowest in the fleet for instinctive xenophobia, and his service file contained a commendation for talking a panicking midshipman through a 9-hour suit failure by reciting the entire plot of a book about a rabbit. Resh met them at the transfer collar of the guild tender, in the shadow of the firing basket, where the cartographer sat in its cradle with its repaired antique hull throwing back the work lights. She had rehearsed protocols for this moment for 2 days. Every one of them evaporated when the inner door opened and she stood for the first time in the physical presence of human beings, small, dense, quick-eyed creatures, radiating heat she could feel through her vents at 2 paces, their flat faces naked of membrane, alarmingly easy to read. The young one, Brandt, looked at her, at a gray-skinned, double-pupiled, two-hearted official of an empire his species had not known existed a month ago, and his naked face did something complicated, and what it settled on was a tired, crooked, entirely unmistakable smile. Warden Avon, he said, and his machine translated the round, soft syllables into clean cipher. The lady from the tower, she talks about you on every call, you know. You and the orange paste. He held out one 5-fingered hand, then caught himself, glanced at his wrist display for the briefing's gesture guidance, and instead placed his palm flat against the bulkhead. The carrier's gesture, learned in 2 days, offered in greeting. Thank you for answering. Resh placed her own 4-fingered palm flat beside his. She told me to stay where the uniform is, she said. Tell me, Lieutenant, does your species actually know how to wait outside doors? Or is the fleet at my gate the politest siege in your history? Oh, it's the politest siege in our history, ma'am, Brandt said, by a really wide margin. And that, recorded by both sides simultaneously, entered into 2 archives. The first joke ever exchanged between humanity and the Hadron Imperium was how first contact actually happened. Not at the arch with the fleets and the banners, but at a transfer collar under work lights, 2 junior officers with their palms on the same bulkhead, on their way to check on a child. Etta Lynn opened the cartographer's hatch herself. She had insisted, the probe relayed apologetically. She had practiced the hatch sequence for 2 days. It was her ship and her door, and she would answer it. The wheel spun, the hatch swung, and in the opening, small in the antique's small light, stood the whole impossible reason for the fleets and the rulings and the unsealed gates. A human child, gap-toothed, dark hair pushed back with a clip shaped like some earth animal nobody present could name, wearing a survey crew jumpsuit 3 sizes too large with the sleeves rolled into fat cuffs and a name patch that said Lynn A., her mother's. She looked at the 2 humans, and at the tall gray warden behind them, and the order in which she did things rearranged several careers' worth of diplomatic planning. She stepped straight past her own species, crossed the collar, stopped in front of Resh, and looked up. "You're Buzzy," she said. "I knew you'd be tall." There was a protocol. It had been negotiated. Resh, a then carrier of record, abandoned it without 1 gram of regret, and did the thing her body had decided to do hours before her rank could vote. She knelt, down onto the deck of the collar, taking the floor's weight, bringing her double-pupiled eyes level with the child's brown ones, and the image went into both archives and then, leaked within a day, lattice and relay both because some things refused to stay filed, into the common memory of 2 species. The first meeting, an Empire's warden kneeling to a foundling, her open hand held out flat, and a 9-year-old setting her small one onto it like the last piece of a bridge. "I stayed right there," Etta said. "Like you said. I didn't wander off." "You did perfectly," Resh said, her voice held. Later, she was proud of that. "Best cargo on the road. It's on the record, Doctor." Okonkwo's examination took an hour and changed the human understanding of the universe twice. The first time, Etta Lynn was healthy, flawlessly, freakishly healthy. Hydrated, nourished, muscles toned as if the long sleep had been a long weekend. The cold sleep cellular damage that 3-century-old human technology should have inflicted simply absent repaired. The physician said quietly, "At a level we can identify but not describe." Biologically, the daughter of the Thessaly was 9 years, 4 months old. She had been gone 331 years and had aged 19 days of them. The second time was the survey bay itself. The humans walked the little ship like people in a church. The bay Etta lived in was the Thessaly's actual survey bay. The original compartment, cut whole from the wreck. Every fracture surface polished mirror smooth, where it had been seamlessly fused into the rebuilt hull. Inside it, 331 years of care were legible in layers. Her sleep pod, antique human engineering, rebuilt with the same not describable repair down to its smallest seal. Her mother's jumpsuit, cleaned, folded, left where a waking child would find it. The food printer, stocked. Okonkwo sampled the orange paste and stood very still for a moment and said it was a flavor-accurate match for a commercial fruit blend last manufactured in the Sol System 3 centuries ago. The quiet people had reverse-engineered a dead brand of apricot dessert from the Thessaly's pantry residue because it was what her mother had packed. And on the bay's aft bulkhead, where a child waking alone would see it first, the quiet people had left their only piece of decoration anywhere on the vessel. Hundreds of small drawings, etched fine into the metal at a child's eye height. A procession of round, simple, careful figures, suns, ships, wavy lines that might have been roads, stick figures holding hands, in a style any human or hadron would recognize at one glance and identify the same way. "They drew for her," Brant said. "He had his fingers an inch from the etching, not touching. 300 years of whatever they are. Gate builders, road gods. And they sat in this bay drawing suns with faces so she wouldn't wake up to bare metal." He looked at Resh, and his naked readable face was asking the question his report would phrase formally. "What are they, Warden? What did your people see, all those years holding their roads?" "Nothing," Resh said. "Not a hull, not a signal, not a shadow. 900 years of records, and we never saw them once." She looked at the procession of round, careful figures. "We were the drawings, Lieutenant. We just never woke up to look at the wall." The vault was last. The cartographer announced it without being asked. When the inspection neared the drum's aft frame, a sealed compartment, carried under instruction, to be opened only at joint inspection, only under the carriage, only with the carrier and the cargo's own kin both present. The hatch was new metal, and etched on it, in the quiet people's small, precise script, and underneath, in painstaking, slightly uneven antique human lettering, as if copied character by a patient hand learning a dead alphabet for one purpose, a single line in the Thessaly's own language, for the ones who come for her. Inside, racked in fitted cradles in machined order, the quiet people had stowed 3 things. The first was the Thessaly's flight recorder, the actual recorder, antique, scorched, its casing still wearing the violence of the drive collapse. And beside it, a second device of no human or hadron manufacture which, when Brandt's equipment interfaced with the recorder, turned out to contain the same data, error-corrected, restored, and extended. The recorder's last corrupted minutes rebuilt clean. The death of the Thessaly, 331 years unanswered, ran on the shuttle's display in front of 2 species while the child concerned slept in the next compartment under a physician's monitor. The experimental transit, the margin alarm at the hollow reach, the collapse blooming out of the drive frame like winter. Chief Engineer Amaya Lin sprinting the length of a dying ship with her daughter over her shoulder, sealing her into the survey bay's sleep pod. The bay with the best radiation shadow on the ship, the recorder's audio caught it all, her voice never once rising, kissing the pod's window, saying, "One sleep, Bug, one sleep, and we're home, you'll see," and going back. Going back to the drive frame with the rest of the 41 to fight 11 minutes of physics for the reactor containment, and winning, the containment held, the bay held, the child lived, and losing everything else. There had been no attack. There had never been an attack. The cuts that Earth had carried for 3 centuries like a stone under the heart were exactly what Resh had called them across a strategium table. Salvage cuts made by the quiet people's tools, 11 hours after the collapse, when something vast and unrecorded arrived at the hollow reach margin, read the wreck, found the one warm signature in the cold, and cut a straight, gentle, surgically perfect line to the survey bay with. The rebuilt recorder data showed it plainly, its cutting tools throttled to 1/10 power the entire way, so that no vibration would crack the bay's last seals. The second thing in the vault was a slate of new metal, etched edge to edge in the small, precise script, paired line by line with that same painstaking copied human lettering. A translation, prepared across 3 centuries for this one reading. The Manifest of the Dead. 41 names, ranks, and stations, copied from the Thessaly's own records, and beside each name a second line. And what the second line held, in every case, was a sentence about how that person had spent their last 11 minutes, held containment valve 9 against Cascade, cleared the engine watch to the lifeboats that could not launch and stayed, sang on the open channel so the child would sleep. The quiet people had not just salvaged a wreck. They had read its last 11 minutes the way scholars read a text, and judged what they found there, and decided it was worth 300 years of answering. At the slate's foot, alone, the small script and the careful human letters together, they spent themselves well. She comes of good people. We return her with interest. The third thing in the vault was small, and it was for Etta, and it was the reason Reshaven, who had held her voice level through the hail, the statute, the marshal, and the court, finally lost the fight with it. It was her mother's wedding ring recovered from the drive frame, cleaned, resized by some immaculate process to fit a 9-year-old finger now and engineered, Okonkwo's instruments confirmed it, disbelieving, to resize itself slowly over decades so that it would fit the woman the child would become at every year of her life. Threaded onto a chain of new metal, and accompanying it, indexed to the recorder's audio, a final entry. In those 11 minutes, between the valve and the cascade, Amaya Lin had turned her face once toward the survey bay's pickup, knowing it was recording, knowing she would not be there for the waking, and had left a message for whoever came for her daughter. It was 9 seconds long. It said what such messages say: Bug, you did everything right. Bug, none of this is yours to carry. Love is not canceled by distance or time. Grow. And it ended with the sentence that the 2 species in the shuttle's small cabin would each, in their own archives, in their own languages, file as the moment their long, strange convergence at the old gate stopped being a crisis and became a vow. To whoever is hearing this, whoever you are, whenever you are, she likes the window seat, she's brave about everything except thunder, and she is the best of us. Carry her well. In the silence afterward, Lieutenant Theo Brandt wiped his streaming, naked, readable face with the heel of his hand and looked across the vault at the kneeling gray warden whose own grief ran silent through flared vents, and said hoarsely the thing both archives record: they knew, Warden. 300 years ago, light years from anywhere, in a language nobody alive had ever spoken to them. Your law. Her last order. The same 4 words. He looked down at the ring in its cradle. Who taught it to whom? And from the bay door, where she had appeared on bare feet, with a physician hovering helpless behind her, in her mother's too big jumpsuit with the sleeves rolled into cuffs, Etta Lin, awake and present, and looking at the slate of 41 names she could not yet read, asked the question that no one in 2 empires had prepared for, in a voice gone very small and very steady: That's Mom's ring. Why do you have Mom's ring? Abresh. Why does everybody keep crying when they think I'm asleep? How long was I asleep? The room held still. Okonkwo moved first, a half step. Brandt's hand came up. Somewhere in the lattice, no doubt, a protocol existed. Resh Avin put it all aside, and turned on her knees to face the cargo she had claimed in front of 11 guns, and held out her open hand, flat. Come sit, Etta, she said. It's time I told you about the road. What was said in the survey bay of the cartographer in the next hour exists in no archive. By joint agreement, proposed by a warden, seconded by a lieutenant, ratified on the spot by a physician who shut off her own recorder with her thumb, the carriage record shows a gap, the only one in its span marked in 2 languages: private. Cargo and carrier. What is known as this? They sat on the floor of the bay, beneath the wall of round, careful suns, the gray warden cross-legged with her gangling height folded down small, and the child in the circle of her mother's rolled sleeves, and Reshaven told the truth the way the lane law demanded truth be told. All of it, plainly, at the speed the listener could carry. The one sleep that had not been one night. The home that was still home, still real, still waiting, and changed the way a garden is changed when you come back to it grown. Every person she was missing now, a name on a wall that an entire civilization had refused for 3 centuries to stop reading aloud. The mother who had not made it to the waking, and had spent her last 11 minutes making sure the waking would come anyway. What is known, because Lieutenant Brant stood outside the bay door the whole hour and never pretended afterward to have heard nothing, is that there was crying, the hard kind, the kind that is work, and that the buzzy voice under it never stopped, low and level, the way you talk a hull through a failing margin. And what is known, because this part Etta herself told everyone, told the physician and the Commodore, and eventually a joint session of 2 governments with the fierce insistence of a child correcting the record, is that at the worst of it, at the very bottom, the warden had not said any of the things grown-ups say to make crying stop. She had said, "Your mother's last order was carry her well. Mine is what the lane brings alive," the warden delivers. They're the same law, Etta. 2 species wrote it without ever meeting. You are the proof it's true everywhere. So you cry as long as it takes, and then you and I are going to finish her order. We're going to deliver you home, and you are going to grow. And that is what winning looks like, this far out in the dark. When the bay door opened at last, Edelyn walked out on her own feet, eyes wrecked and dry, wearing her mother's ring on its chain outside the jumpsuit where everyone could see it, holding the warden's gray hand. She looked up at Brant, and the question she asked him was the first sentence of the rest of her life. "Were you born on Earth? What's it like now?" Don't say it's complicated. Everybody says that. The convoy for the carriage of Etta Lynn departed Corval Spire on the 5th day, and it was the strangest formation the spine had carried in 900 years. A guild tender with an antique probe in its cradle. A Warden Pathfinder cutter, Lane 11's own, with the carrier of record and the cargo aboard. Etta had refused, with the full unappealable authority of the statute behind her, to ride anywhere except with Resh, and the human envoy shuttle holding the rear. Interval. No warships. The court's ruling had been explicit. The carriage travels under law, not under guns. Every gun on the spur is its escort. The arbiter had written, precisely because none of them travel with it. For 6 hours, it was the most watched convoy in the history of 2 species. Every freighter crew on the spur found a reason to be at a viewport. The dead tariff arrays lit and tracked, gate after gate. On the open band, restored by court order, draft seal broken by a one-line ruling that the carriage conducts itself in the light. Etta provided what she firmly believed was a professional traffic report. "That's gate 9, the buzzy lady says it's the oldest one on our road. There's a freighter with green lights. Hello, freighter. Mr. Cardo says we're holding interval better than the ore haulers," which is a traffic joke. 1,100 hulls listened. Recordings of it sold decades later as lullabies. At gate 9, the oldest on the road, the mid-spur junction where the dead lane married the living network, Marshal Oven Drass stopped the carriage. It was done with perfect procedural manners. A flag navigational hold broadcast in proper form. Anomalous gate telemetry, safety of the lane, all traffic to stand to and await flag inspection teams. The convoy's boards went amber, the tender's cradle locks engaged, and out of the junction's shadow, where they had been holding dark for 11 hours on flag orders that had never touched the lattice, came 4 interdictors of the marshal's own detachment, batteries warm, boarding tubes already extending, and the inspection team's manifest, transmitted in the same perfect form, listed its destination as the guild tender, its purpose as materiel audit, and its authorization as a flag intelligence finding, sealed that morning, declaring the cartographer's chart archive a Class 1 existential security asset that would not, under any disposition by any court, leave Hadron control. The plan, as the inquiry later established, was exactly what it looked like and 1 degree worse. The audit team would remove the chart cores. The probe, drive dead, helpless in its cradle, would suffer a documented engineering casualty during handling, regrettable, total. The child would proceed to the arch unharmed, delivered with full honors, the Imperium's compliance with the court technically immaculate. Earth would receive its citizen, and a sincere apology for the loss of the artifact. The quiet people's keys, charts, and evidence would be ash. And the door the old gate had opened would close again permanently behind 1 rescued child and 200 years of carefully managed silence. "Flag hold acknowledge gate 9, Resh said from the cutter, flat, while her board told her what the manifest meant. Beside her, Etta had gone still, reading. With the terrible barometric accuracy of a child who has spent 19 days learning adults through a speaker, change in the buzzy voice. Carriage notes for the record that the hold interrupts a court-sealed delivery and requests the anomalous telemetry, which my own board does not show. The telemetry is a flag matter, Warden. Draft's voice, not a deputy's. He had come to do it himself. The inquiry made much of that later both ways. Your cargo is not in question. Stand your cutter clear of the tender, and this will be brief. My cargo, Resh said, is defined by the statute, Marshal. Shall I read you the definition? What the lane brings alive, and all it carries for them. Her ship is the carriage. Her mother's ring is the carriage. The recorder that holds her mother's voice is the carriage. Her hand was moving as she spoke, keying the thing she had rigged quietly 3 days earlier and prayed to need never use. Not a weapon. The cutter had none worth the name. A switch. You are not auditing materiel, Marshal. You are boarding a foundling's carriage under arms. Last chance to have never done this. Stand clear, Warden. That is an order under flag authority, and flag authority is not suspended by embroidery. Then the embroidery, Resh said, will now read you out loud. And she threw the switch, and the carriage record, the open ledger the statute required, every hail, every order, every manifest, time-stamped and sealed, stopped being a log and became a broadcast, out onto the open band, in the clear, to the spur, to the lattice, to 1,100 hulls, to the storm iron fleet listening at the arch, and to every warden station on the spine, the entire exchange at Gate 9, including the audit manifest, including the intelligence finding, including the boarding tube's telemetry, narrated by nothing except its own timestamps. She had not patched anyone anywhere. She had simply made the lane's oldest instrument do, at scale, the only thing it had ever done. Write down what the road carries in front of everyone the road belongs to. What happened next happened in 4 minutes and was studied for 100 years. First, the painting went out. The spine's targeting architecture was a guild architecture. 900 years of weapons doctrine built on warden relays painting lane traffic with designation light. Because in a rail network, every shot threads between civilian hulls and only the wardens hold the lane picture. The 4 interdictors' batteries went to lock, and the lock request routed, as every lock request on the spine had routed for 9 centuries, through the junction's warden ring. And the watch wardens of Gate 9, third shift lane officers, tariff clerks in gray, none of whom had ever fired or been fired upon, looked at a designation request whose target field read carriage, statute of the drowned lane, and refused it, not with debate. With Form 11C, the refusal of unlawful designation form, a document so old its header still carried the Guild's pre-imperial seal, filed simultaneously by every warden on the ring. And then, when flag override codes came down the wire, with the dimming of the relays themselves, gate by gate, the painting light of the junction going dark around the convoy like lamps blown out around a sleeping child. Within 90 seconds, the refusals were cascading up the spur as warden rings at gates the convoy had already passed dimmed theirs in solidarity, and the 4 interdictors of the marshal's detachment hung at a junction of the most sophisticated fire control network in known space, with their batteries warm and their solutions blind, unable to thread a shot past 1,100 civilian hulls that their own targeting system now rendered as one undifferentiated mass of protected traffic. Second, at the arch, the storm iron fleet moved. Commodore Lila Reyes had been listening to the carriage record with her command staff, and at the words boarding tubes the Bellwether's group crossed the threshold of the old gate. Slowly, weapons still cold, launch decks still sealed, but inbound down the dead lane, the first armed human formation in history entering the spine, transmitting in the clear on the carriage band a single sentence, repeated, addressed not to the Imperium but to the convoy. Edda, Warden, Bellwether is coming up the road. Nobody is alone out there. Third Corval Spire spoke. Prefect Dolmas Kiri, 40 years of regulation, listening to the cascade from his master rail, opened the all-spur command channel. Outranked by the marshal in every line of the table of authority, except, as it turned out, the one that mattered, and entered into the record the sentence that ended his career and started his legend. This bastion holds the court's seal on the carriage of Edda Lynn. The seal does not recognize flag exceptions. Corval Spire designates the convoy at Gate 9 as protected carriage under the statute of the drowned lane and stands ready to enforce the law of the road against all parties. A pause and then dry as dust, the postscript the Guild later engraved over the door of its academy. All parties, Marshal, withdraw your tubes. And fourth, the road itself voted. The lights came first, every dead tariff array at Gate 9 waking at once, not tracking now but illuminating, flooding the junction with steady-weight survey light. The boarding tubes and the interdictors and the little convoy all pinned in it like specimens on a table. Then the junction's gate spoke, for the first time in recorded history, in a transmission that every receiver in the system rendered perfectly, and no cryptographer ever explained the 11 words, the same 11, in the small, precise script and in clean current cipher, and the part that emptied, the breath out of every hadron on the spur, in the round, soft, antique syllables of the loud world, all three at once, on every band. We kept her alive. The road is yours now. Carry well. Nothing else. No demand, no deadline, no demonstration of force, which was, Resh understood, both hearts hammering in the white light, itself the demonstration. The landlords present, watching, declining to intervene, saying in 11 words that the test was still running, and the Imperium was still the one taking it. Marshal Oven Drast stood on his flag bridge in the survey light, blind batteries warm around him. A human fleet inbound on a lane his charts called dead, his boarding manifest reading itself aloud to 50 light-years, and the inquiry record shows that he said nothing at all for 2 minutes and 11 seconds. The Hadron Imperium had built 900 years on a single architecture of certainty. Hold the roads, and you hold everything that moves. Every assumption of his rank ran down into that bedrock, and the bedrock had just spoken 3 languages and sided with the cargo. Flag hold is rescinded, Drast said at last, and his voice on the record sounds like a man reading his own demotion aloud, which functionally, he was. Audit canceled. Detachment will retract tubes and stand down batteries. A pause. Convoy of the carriage, proceed. In the cutter, in the white survey light, Edelyn let out a slow breath, looked up at her warden, and rendered the inquiry's entire eventual finding in one sentence on the open band into history. That gate, she said, likes you. The convoy and the human fleet met at the old gate 6 hours later, in the amber light of Veshant rising beyond the arch, and what happened there was watched live by more sentient beings than any event in the recorded history of either species. The Bellwether Group had halted its advance the moment the flaghold rescinded, then withdrawn, back down the dead lane stern first, a maneuver of pointed and deliberate courtesy, leaving the road clear and taking station beyond the arch exactly where the court's choreography had placed it, as if the last 6 hours had not happened. But the formation had changed. The escorts had opened their interval, falling back and outward into a wide crescent, and the great carrier had come forward alone, her launch decks sealed, her batteries not merely cold but visibly unkeyed, turrets locked in their travel cradles. A warship the length of a city presenting herself at a foreign door with her hands open at her sides. Storm iron, scarred, blunt as a verdict, the white antique numerals of her name burning in Veshant's amber, the Earth Coalition ship Bellwether waited at the arch for a 41-meter probe and a cutter the size of one of her shuttles, and dipped her bow as they came, a slow, deliberate, 3-degree pitch and recovery that needed no catalog to translate. And the Imperium answered. Nobody ever produced the order. The inquiry looked, half-heartedly, and the guild never told. As the carriage crossed the last kilometers of the dead lane, the warships of Marshal Drast's detachment, holding their mandated distance, and behind them, on every feet on the spur, the bastion squadrons of the third spine in their berths, and the patrol hulls in their lanes, and gray old Corval spire itself on its needle above the storms, pitched prow down 3 degrees and held. The carrier's bow, the lane salute older than the Imperium, rendered by every hadron gun in the system not to the human fleet and not to each other, but to the smallest vessel any of them had ever escorted. 2 war machines, 50 light-years apart in their making, bowed in the same grammar over the same child, and the image went into the common memory of 2 species and stayed there. Resh flew the crossing herself. The last span, from the arch's shadow to the Bellwether's open boat bay, was 4 kilometers of unclaimed dark, off the rail, outside the spine. The first 4 kilometers a Hadron Guildcraft had ever flown beyond its own roads. The cutter handled like a frightened animal off the rail, and Resh flew it the way she had talked to a frightened child on the open band. Low and level and absolutely certain, with the spent cartographer riding the tender's cradle alongside, and Edelyn in the jump seat beside her in her mother's jumpsuit with her mother's ring on its chain, narrating the approach to Mr. Cardo in a voice that only shook twice. Last instruction, the probe said as the boat bay's lights took them. It had been silent most of the transit. Warden Evan, query for our log. Go ahead, cartographer. We were given 3 instructions. Carry her gently. Follow the old roads as far as they go. When the roads end, find a warden and ask. A pause, and the machine that had crossed 3 centuries and an empire on borrowed keys asked the question it had been carrying as long as the child. The roads have ended, Warden. We have asked. Our drive is spent, and our task is nearly over. What does a carrier do when the carrying is done? Resh looked out through the canopy at the bay rising to meet them, at the deck crews in their lines at the honor guard, at the small knot of figures at the head of it, at the place where the road she had walked her whole life ran out into a future neither empire had charted. The same thing it does the whole way, cartographer, she said. It stays the carrier. The carrying doesn't end. It just changes hands. You'll see. About 30 seconds from now. The handover of Etta Lynn took place at the center of the Bellwether's boat bay, on a deck polished to a shine, under the flags of a coalition 3 centuries downstream of everything she remembered, in front of 200 human crew at attention and 1 antique probe in a cradle and a galaxy's worth of live feeds, and it was conducted, in the end, by nobody but the principals, because every official with a speech had finally, mercifully, understood that there was nothing for them to add. Commodore Lila Reyes came forward alone. She was younger than her voice, dark-eyed, parade-straight, with a Thessaly Recovery Group's patch on her shoulder, a small stylized lantern that was not a lantern, Resch realized, but a relay tower, the kind her species had built outward for 3 centuries in the direction of a dead ship, just in case. 3 paces away, she stopped, and her eyes went from the child to the warden and back, and whatever the diplomats had drafted for her dissolved. So it was Resch who spoke first, because she was the carrier, and the carrier delivers, and delivery has a grammar, and she had decided somewhere over the last 4 kilometers that the grammar should be spoken whole, once in the hearing of both their species, so that neither could ever pretend not to know it. She knelt, taking the floor's weight, her open hand flat on a human deck, and she said, "Commodore, 331 years ago, the lane brought your ship's daughter to us alive. The law of our road is 4 sentences. What the lane brings alive, the warden delivers to its own." She lifted Etta's small hand in her gray one and placed it, with the precision of a docking, into the Commodore's. "Delivered," she said, "whole and brave about everything except thunder, and the best of both of us. The carriage of Etta Lynn is complete." Her voice stayed level the entire way, which both archives note, and her vents did not, which only one of them does, carry her well. Lila Reyes, commander of the politest siege in human history, closed her hand around the child's and got down, in front of 200 crew at attention and every live feed in 2 empires, onto one knee on her own deck, eye level with them both, and answered in the careful, slightly uneven Hadron she had been practicing in her cabin for 5 days, with the accent of someone taught by a machine and a 9-year-old, warden of the road. Earth receives her own. Then, in her own language, looking at Etta, "Welcome home, crewman Lynn. You're 300 years late and right on time." And Etta Lynn, who had done everything right, who had stayed where the uniform was, who had crossed more dark than any human in history, with her courage held together by pace counts and a buzzy voice on a speaker, looked around the bay at the flags and the honor guard and the 2 kneeling officers of 2 empires, and asked the question that broke, and then somehow mended every heart on the feed at once. "Is there thunder on Earth still?" And when Reyes managed, "Yes." "Good, I want to be brave about it this time. Mom said you grow." She turned then, and did the last unscripted thing of the carriage. She let go of the Commodore's hand, came back, and wrapped her arms as far around the kneeling warden as they would go, which was not far, and pressed her face against the gray uniform with its single stripe and the boat bay of the ECS Bellwether, 200 crew at attention, listened to a child say goodbye to a crossing guard. "You said nobody gets lost on your road," Etta said, muffled fierce. "And nobody did," Resch said. "You have to come visit. That's an order. Carriers have to do orders from cargo. I checked, it's not in there, but it should be." "I'll petition the court," Resch said gravely. Then, because carriers carry, she reached up and did the thing she had cleared with nobody. She unwound the rank band from her forearm, the single gray stripe of a warden 3rd grade, the lowest commission mark the guild issued, the stripe a child had once asked about across an open band, and wound it twice around a small wrist and tucked the end lane fashion. "There. You stayed where the uniform was all the way home. So now you keep a piece of the uniform all the way grown." Her vents flared once and steadied. "It's the only stripe I've got, Etta Lynn. I want it looked after." "I'll keep it forever," said the daughter of the Thessaly. With the whole weight of a promise, and 300 years of waiting came to rest. At last, on a polished deck in the amber light of a foreign sun, in the shape of a gray band on a small wrist wound twice tucked, lane fashion, Commodore Reyes rose last. Before she did, still on one knee, she unfastened the patch from her own shoulder. The recovery group's small stylized relay tower, the one Resch had taken at first glance for a lantern, and held it out flat on her palm the way she had seen the carrier's gesture done. "We have a tradition too, Warden," she said. "Older than the fleet. You build the tower whether or not you believe anyone's out there, and you keep the watch whether or not anyone has ever answered, because the answering isn't the reason. The keeping is." She looked down at the patch. 3 centuries of paid subscriptions and pointless, faithful maintenance rendered in 2 square inches of thread. 11 generations of my family kept a tower for a ship everyone knew was gone. You're the one who proved the tower right. Earth would take it as an honor if the first one of these ever worn by a non-human was worn by the warden who answered. A pause, and the Commodore's parade straightness cracked one last time into something younger. Also, ma'am, between professionals, 1,100 hulls worth of traffic control, and you kept a sealed channel warm for a 9-year-old's card games. Where I'm from, we have a word for that kind of watchkeeping. We put it on patches. Resh took the small tower in her gray palm and fixed it, lane fashion, slightly off regulation, beside where her stripe had been. Where I'm from, she said, we have a word for building 3 centuries of towers toward a silence. Her vents flared, amber light through them. We were taught it as hatchlings about the ones who built our roads. We were taught it meant gone. Your species just stood in my sky and corrected the translation, Commodore. It means coming. It always meant coming. The towers are how you can tell who still believes they're lost or coming home. She closed her hand around the patch. I'll wear the watch. Earth keeps good law. It was at that moment, both archives agree on the timing, and neither has ever explained it, that every dead tariff array on the old gate lit together one last time, held for 11 seconds steady and white like a long look back from a doorway, and went dark for good. The cartographer settled the last argument of the carriage itself, 1 hour before the human fleet departed, and it did so in a manner that the Hadron Imperium never quite recovered from, because it was a manner the Imperium could not have imagined choosing. The probe was going home, that had never been in question on the human side. It was the Thessaly's daughter, as surely as the girl was, and Earth does not leave its own at the door. What remained in question, in a final, carefully polite exchange between the Coalition's council and the marshals, was the cargo nobody had dared name at the handover. The charts, the complete map of the spine, every military rail, every dead spur, every key, riding home in an alien hold, the single greatest intelligence prize in 900 years, and not one thing the Imperium could lawfully do about it. The cartographer listened to the council circle the question for 11 minutes. Then it asked permission to address the carriage band, was granted it, and spoke to both fleets at once in both languages at once with the dead-level courtesy it had carried across 3 centuries. This vessel was given 3 instructions and has completed them. This vessel was also given the roads and the keys for the duration of the task. A pause. The task is complete. The roads were never ours to keep. They were never anyone's to keep. They are a thing one is lent and tends and hands-on. We were told this by the ones who repaired us, and we have seen nothing in 50 light-years to contradict them. And then, witnessed by both archives, unprompted, unasked, with the entire intelligence apparatus of 2 civilizations watching helplessly, the cartographer purged its own chart cores, all of it, the network, the dead lanes, the keys, the small precise annotations, 3 centuries of the quiet people's cartography burning down to one retained file, which it transmitted in the clear to Corval Spire, addressed to the Warden Ring, 3rd Watch. It was the chart of Lane 11, 1 lane, annotated in the quiet people's hand, with a single line the linguistic engines rendered before anyone could classify it. The road that answered, recommend, more like this one. Disposition of remaining materiel, the probe continued serene while 2 empires stared. The recorder, the slate, and the names belong to Earth. The lesson belongs to everyone. This vessel retains 1 passenger manifest marked complete, 19 days of conversation logs marked precious, and the heading home. Cartographer, daughter of Thessaly, requesting final transit instruction from Lane 11 Control. A pause, and Resh would have sworn before the court itself that the machine's voice changed 1 degree on the last sentence. For the log warden, we were told to find a warden and ask. We are asking, which way is home? Resh keyed the channel for the last time. Cartographer, Lane 11 Control, she said. Heading, follow the big gray ship. She knows the way. You are cleared all roads, all gates, for the rest of your service, by order of the carrier of record witnessed by the lane. Her voice held, her vents did not. The archive notes both. It's been the privilege of this road, cartographer.
Safe home.
An acknowledged control. The antique's mechanical mass swiveled, bearings and all. 331 years old and 40 years young, and aligned itself on the storm iron carrier like a compass finding north. It has been the privilege of the dark. Cartographer out. What followed the way dawn follows. Slowly, then all at once, then so completely that the time before it became difficult to explain to children. Marshal Oven Drass was not destroyed. The Imperium did not work that way, and the inquiry's finding, exceeding zeal in the protection of assets subsequently demonstrated to be unprotectable, was crafted to let an old officer reach retirement with his bands intact. But his flag came down within the year, and the doctrine he had spent his life serving came down with it, dismantled not by reformers but by arithmetic. The Imperium's entire strategic position had rested on being the only species that could move, and the species that could move without roads had come to its outermost gate, knocked, waited, and gone home with nothing but its own child. Closed was no longer a strategy. Closed was a habit, and the habit had been seen through by everyone at once, the way habits are. Prefect Dolmas Kira refused the promotion to the spine's high command twice, the second time in writing, in language the guild framed, and accepted instead the commandancy of the Warden Academy, where he taught lane law to first years until the end of his life, opening every term the same way. By playing them the recording of a small voice asking the way home, and then asking the hall mildly what the regulations required, and listening to 40 hatchling wardens discover, one by one, that every regulation pointed both directions at once, and that the stripe was for choosing. Arbiter Selaverne lived 3 more years, long enough to draft, with a mixed commission of Hadron jurists and coalition council, and one extremely opinionated 11-year-old advisor attending by relay, the instrument the two species signed at the Old Gate on the 2nd anniversary of the handover. The diplomats titled it the Treaty of Mutual Transit and Common Carriage. Nobody has ever called it that. The Foundling Lane, the dead spur from the Old Gate to Corval Spire, resurveyed, relit, and registered as the first lane in 900 years open to a foreign flag, appeared on Hadron charts under its formal designation for exactly one printing before the guild's cartographers, in a quiet mutiny of typography, renamed it what every freighter crew already called it, Edda's Road. The treaty's first article was 4 sentences long, and they were the old 4, adopted verbatim, by both species as the founding law of the peace. The lanes carry. What the lane brings alive, the warden delivers to its own. The carriage is sacred, and the cargo owes nothing. A gun raised against carried life is raised against the road itself. The quiet people never appeared. No hull, no signal, no shadow. Only twice more in the following decade, a dead gate waking somewhere on the network's far margins to pass some small lost thing inward. A disabled Hadron mining skiff, 80 years overdue, its hibernating crew alive. A tumbling escape capsule of a species nobody had met yet, which was its own story and the beginning of others. The spine had been a wall for 900 years. It began gate by gate to remember it had been built as a door. And Earth did what the catalog had always said it would do. The thing 3 centuries of intercepts had documented and no Hadran strategist had been able to believe until it was standing in their sky being polite. It came back. Not with fleets, with freighters, with surveyors, with teams of disgustingly enthusiastic exchange students who learned lane cipher faster than the tariff clerks could update the forms, with engineers who looked at 900-year-old gate machinery the way Hadrons had once heard humans sing to "They're Dead," and with a relay chain built jointly running from the Old Gate to Saul, so that no voice crossing that particular dark would ever again have to knock for 300 years before somebody answered. Etta Lynn grew. That is the part of the story the feeds could never quite let alone, and the part she defended most fiercely as her own. She went home, and home held. The Capitol wall with the 42 names was amended in her presence on her first day on Earth, not by removing her name, which she refused, but by adding one word beside it in the same bronze as all the rest, delivered. She stood under it, holding the hands of 2 descendants of the Thessaly's navigator, a great something niece and her wife who had been keeping the family's relay subscription paid for 3 generations without ever once saying out loud why, and she lived with them, and there was a window seat. And in her 2nd month, the sky over their valley broke open into the first thunderstorm of her 2nd childhood, and she sat in the window seat and shook and stayed and watched the whole thing to the end. Grow, her mother had said. She grew. She kept the stripe. She wore it through school, through the treaty signing, through the academy, because of course it was the academy, coalition exchange program, lane certification track, first human cohort. The feeds wore themselves out over it, and she ignored them with a professionalism that Kiri publicly graded. And on the morning she received her own commission, the youngest licensed foreign warden in the guild's history, she wound the old gray band around her forearm beneath the new one, twice tucked lane fashion, where it has remained on every watch she has ever stood. Which brings the story the long way around to where it ends, to a 3rd watch on the ring of Corval Spire, 11 years after a stone dropped into a stream of glass beads. Resh Aven stands the master rail now. The bands on her forearm have multiplied beyond anything her first prefect would have predicted aloud, though he predicted all of it in writing, in a sealed assessment opened at his death. She is not sentimental about the work. The work does not permit it. Lane 11 on a 3rd watch is 1,100 registered hulls in a gravity rail, and the board does not care what history was made on it. But she has one habit the junior wardens notice and do not ask about. When a new contact rises on the priority channel, she is never anywhere but at the board, and she always answers the first hail herself. On this particular watch, the contact comes up the Foundling Lane at the metered crawl of a vessel being fussy about its interval, broadcasting its registry in 2 languages. A coalition training cutter, out of the academy circuit, flying the joint flag, requesting transit instruction for the inner spur. The voice that makes the request is young and human and entirely certain of its cipher, and underneath the procedure there is something in it that was once 9 years old and counting orange paste tubes in the dark. Steady now, grown now, wearing 2 stripes wound on one arm. Lane 11 control, this is training cutter EC31 inbound on Edda's Road. Requesting clearance and interval, the voice says, in flawless current cipher. And then, because some procedures are older than any registry. Hello, Tower. Permission to come home the short way? Reshavin leans over her board, on the road that answered, and both her hearts settle into the old offset, the one that used to mean falling and has meant for 11 years now exactly the opposite. EC31, lane 11 control, she says. Clearance granted. Interval is yours. Welcome back to my road, Warden Lin. Nobody gets lost on it. And down the wire, bright across the band that an empire once sealed and a child once opened, comes the sound the whole long story was for. A young woman laughing on a clear channel, inbound expected, carried well. Home by every road there is.